one with sprint bursts. Let me take the rest off. Hold on. Let me take the rest of these off real quick. I should have maybe done that to start, but, you know. I'm over here in KYF. So the first perk we're going to talk about is Sprint Burst. What does Sprint Burst do? When you press L1 and hold it, you will sprint. And you leave scratch marks behind you, but you move faster. With Sprint Burst, when you start to run, you break into a sprint at 150% of your normal running speed for 3 seconds, and then get the exhausted effect. When you stop running for 40 seconds, your exhausted will begin to tick down. Why do I think Sprint Burst is overrated? There are a lot of people that say Sprint Burst is the best exhaustion perk in the game. Those people are what I call wrong. This is the worst exhaustion perk in the game. Now, it's better than not having an exhaustion perk. Sometimes. It can also be worse. Let me explain why. So, normally with Sprint Burst, you have to walk everywhere. Otherwise, you're going to waste your Sprint Burst for when you need it most. Which means you're going to pair it with another overrated perk I'll talk about next, in Urban Evasion. Or you're going to pair it with what I consider to be a very underrated perk in Fixated. Now, why is Sprint Burst so bad? Well, you have to compare it to the other exhaustion perks. So you have Balanced Landing, which completely negates a disadvantage of the survivor. Survivors cannot fall from a great height without being slowed and without making noise. Well, Balanced Landing negates that completely. The only downside of Balanced Landing is that you need a vault, a high level, in order to use it. You don't need a vault. I'm kind of loopy. You need a high level in order to use it. But you also get to control when you use it. Okay? It's great. Another exhaustion perk you can run is Adrenaline. Now, the downside is Adrenaline only activates at the end of the game when the gates are powered. If you get killed off before then, you're fucked. But you get two very strong benefits. One is you get a 1 health state. So if you're dying, you get injured, and if you're injured, you get full health. And you get a guaranteed burst of speed, and it overrides your exhaustion. So if you have to dead hard into a pallet, throw the pallet, and they pop the last gen, you're now full health with another burst of speed to get away from the killer. Obviously, no-ed and insta-down killers can combat this. So, you know, a Billy, an Oni, an Iridescent Head Huntress, things of this nature, and no-ed are going to put a foil in this plan. But it's still a very solid end-of-game situation. There is Dead Hard, which, while injured, lets you dash forward, and hopefully, if the server gods are on your side, avoid damage. Again, this is another ability you have control over. There is Lith, which buffs an already strong part to your kit. As a survivor, you vault faster than a killer does, and Lith makes it so you get the burst of speed after vaulting, which is very effective in loops where there's a pallet and a vault. So once you use the pallet and the killer breaks it, you can then vault while they're breaking it and go to the next loop with a pallet and a vault. This is also very good on the majority of the indoor maps. Just like Balanced Landing works on Hawkins, this works very well on Luries. Both can work on Meatpacking. And there is also Head On, which requires a locker, but enables you not just to stun the killer, but free other survivors, which other perks can't do, which is very strong. So why is Sprint Burst then so bad? Sprint Burst is good at one thing, and that is avoiding a hit. This is completely wasted against a stealth killer. A stealth killer who's going to sneak up behind you and grab you or get that first hit, you get no value out of Sprint Burst. In addition to this, Sprint Burst also has the issue because normally as a survivor, you know, you're going to be using L1 and you're going to be running. Well, the issue with that is you've now wasted it. Now, there is the strategy that everybody says where you can 99 it. So you burn the Sprint Burst, you get it down, you get your exhaustion down to where there's just a little bit on the side of the screen over there, and then stand still for a minute, and then Sprint Burst in front like a pseudo Dead Hard. Why? You're better off running Dead Hard. You are. The other difference between Sprint Burst and Dead Hard that's critical for this argument is that Dead Hard works whenever you are injured. This means you can run Dead Hard without needing a way to heal. You can run Dead Hard and say, well, you know what? I don't need to heal right here. I've got my Dead Hard. I can try and tank a hit or two. Sprint Burst, you don't have that. You have to 99 your Sprint Burst and use it like a mock Dead Hard. So if you're injured, you have to run the risk of getting hit before your Sprint Burst. And in addition to this, if you get hit during your Sprint Burst, it is completely wasted, because your adrenaline that you get from getting hit will have the same effect as Sprint Burst anyways. So I think this is a very overrated perk. It slows you down as a survivor because you have to walk around everywhere or crouch walk everywhere. And with that, I will segue to the next overrated perk in my opinion, which is Urban Evasion. Now, Urban Evasion, also known as Urban Immersion, is a perk that has value. Just like Sprint Burst, it does have value. It enables your crouch walking speed to be the same as your regular walking speed. This is very good in situations where you need to be stealthy. However, the issue with this is a lot of players get so used to running Urban Evasion that they simply crouch walk around the map everywhere, which offers a large degree of stealth, but also slows you down still. See, Sprint Burst is the opposite of Urban Evasion. With Sprint Burst, you're afraid of burning your Sprint Burst so you don't run everywhere. But with Urban Evasion, you are so immersed and stealthy that you're afraid to run anywhere because now you're leaving scratch marks. This is commonly known as the Blendette perk, because Claudettes are able to use this and blend into the tall grass very well on certain maps and just urban around like a little snake. The issue with Urban Evasion is this ultimately slows your speed down. Urban Evasion can counter one killer very well, and that is the Hag. Urban Evasion will completely counter Hag traps because they are countered by being crouched. What also does is a flashlight, or just paying attention. Looking at the ground in front of you to see if there's a trap. The downside to Urban Evasion, like Sprint Burst, is the same thing. It takes too much time. As an ideal high-level survivor, both of these perks will slow you down. Both of these perks do not give you a solid benefit, because Urban Evasion is going to have you slowly moving around the map. You will be moving faster than you would just regularly crouch walking, but the issue is you still wouldn't be crouch walking. If the killer is not around you, there's no reason to crouch walk and slow yourself down, because the killer's not around you. And there's no reason to run, because there's no reason to leave scratch marks, unless you know that the killer is in chase with somebody else. If the killer's on the opposite side of the map, there's no reason for you to not sprint between generators. Let's say you're on a map like Astaroth's Resting Place, right? Say you're on an Astaroth Resting Place, which is an Auto Haven record. The killer is on the shack side of the map. You are on the house side of the map. You did the generator over here, and now you're going to do the generator over here. If you know the killer is still over here being looped at shack, there is no reason for you to waste Sprint Burst to get over there, because if it's a teleporting killer, well, now they're going to come get you over there. Well, they can. And there's no reason to crouch walk over there, because now you're wasting your time. There's no reason to walk over there, you can just sprint. But if you're running either of these two perks, there's no reason to do that. These two perks are designed to buff your mobility, but what they actually do at a high level is impair it. Urban slows you down, and Sprint Burst slows you down, but for completely different reasons. The next perk I want to talk about is going to be a relatively interesting one. It's Inner Strength. Now, Inner Strength is one that a lot of people run and consider it right now to be the marquee self-heal ability in the game. However, this is probably, in my opinion, the most dangerous perk you can run. So look at what Inner Strength does. So, whenever you are injured, if you have activated the perk by cleansing a totem, you can then get inside a locker, and it will heal you after 8 seconds. This is also not affected by any heal speed whatsoever. So, this will counter sloppy, this will counter chlorophobia, it's faster than a medkit, it's faster than another survivor healing you, it's definitely faster than SelfCare. Why do I think this is a bad perk? There are 3 key reasons. First is the activation cost. The activation cost is cleansing a totem. This is great, because you want to cleanse all of the totems to prevent no-ed, to remove whatever hexes they have, etc. The issue is that because this perk requires you to cleanse one of 5 things in the map, if other survivors are cleansing those items, well then, very gradually, you run out of ways to heal. Which means you still are in the same situation of having to run either self-care, or a med kit, or finding someone to heal you. Because you're out of totems. In addition to this, I have seen so many survivors. Mind you, I am at red rank. I was rank 1. I've de-pipped down to rank 3 because of the simple fact that the games are being quite shit right now. But inner strength is horrible. I have seen so many survivors. I'm up to 3-digit survivor numbers that have died trying to cleanse a totem with the killer right behind them or inside terror radius just to cleanse that totem. And then they die because they died for a totem so they could heal themselves. Now, some of that is game sense and not the perk. But now let's get into the second issue with this perk. You have to hide in a locker. So Iron Maiden will completely counter this, but oh, that's one perk, not a lot of killers use that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's fine. If you get pulled out of the locker for any reason, it is negated. You lose the inner strength, and you're now on the killer's shoulder. Unless you have Decisive. And if you have head-on with this, there's no reason for that. If you get pulled out of a locker, and you're running head-on, and Decisive, that's one thing. If you get pulled out of a locker with head-on, and you're running inner strength, that's just a waste. You should have head-on and left, and then use your inner strength later. The other issue with this as well is similar to self-care, which I will admit, it negates altruism from the rest of the team. Now that's generic, that's included with self-care. But the main issue with this is, while it is a very quick heal, very toxic players will tend to use this in the killer's terror radius by loudly vaulting into a locker to make noise. And if they try and stealth it and go slowly into the locker, especially in terror radius, they will get tracked by bloodstains in front of the locker. This perk is very easy to counter. I counter this perk all the time playing killer, and I'm not even a high-level killer, because there are I will track the blood marks leading to the locker. Oh yeah, I'll let you heal, and I'll pull you out of the locker. I will take away your inner strength, and then yank your ass out the locker. Now you're on my shoulder. This perk is such a horrible perk for that singular reason. The last perk I want to talk about that I find to be overrated is a relatively toxic one, Object of Obsession. Now, I do like this perk to an extent. It gives the survivor an unfair degree of information. By looking at the killer and the killer looking at you, you will share auras and see what they are doing. Against certain killers, this is absolutely game-breaking. For the Trapper, for the Hag, even for Freddy, this is bad because you will be able to see the killer pretty much all the time. Unless you're on a really large map or you're not the Obsession. That's the only advantage that this perk has. First off, killers hate Object of Obsession, so you can and will get tunneled. A lot. In addition to that, this perk also has the issue of not working against stealth killers or being inside a killer's terror radius. Which means when the killer is coming towards you to tunnel you because they see where you are and what you're doing at all times, that means once you're in their terror radius, you now need to run. You don't have time to stealth away because once you leave terror radius, they will then see you again. Now, you could run something stupid, like you could put Distortion with this, Babysitter, Off the Record, and cheese out a few moments, momentary lapses, where your aura is not revealed, but you're also wasting another perk slot to hide your aura for a very brief amount of time, and you're going to be tunneled a lot with Object of Obsession. Killers do not like you seeing what they're doing, unless you're going up against a stealth killer. If you've got a Myers, if you've got Scratch Mirror Myers, you're not seeing him at all, and he's gonna see you. You got a Ghostface in his power, you're not seeing him at all. A Wraith, a Pig, you're not seeing them at all. They're running Tinkerer, you're not seeing them at all. Insidious face camping, oh, sorry, you're not seeing them. So this perk has a lot of counters to it. I even forgot Demogorgon coming out of a portal. Sorry, not seeing her. Now, the issue with Object as well is it's completely outmatched by Spine Chill for providing you a close range benefit. Object also requires communication. You need to be able to tell your entire team what the killer is doing using that object of obsession. It is very important that you're saying, okay, killer is at XYZ, killer is doing this, killer is heading towards this, killer is this. You're basically doing the shot calling on what the killer is doing, which can disrupt the game flow of your teammates who, you know, might be trying to concentrate on skill checks or the loop that they're running, whatever the case may be. In addition to this, Object doesn't work if you're getting tunneled. It just serves as a way to BM the killer and say, look at me, I'm teabagging, I'm teabagging. It's not a fun perk to run if you like living. I think it's a bit overrated. I see it a lot, and I don't think it is as good as it's cracked up. Now, my 5th slot of overrated perks is one I run. I run this on my Lori, and I run it on a few other characters. But I want to talk about why it's overrated. That's Decisive Strike. I've made a video on this before, but I feel it needs mentioning again. People do not understand that Decisive Strike is a balanced perk. Just because you see red rank level 1 killer or survivors getting their decisive every time doesn't mean it's the best perk in the game. And people say it's the best perk in the game. It's not. There's one reason for this. So-called the correct way to play as a killer is to hook a survivor. They're supposed to be running barbecue. They go to the other side of the map. They chase the survivors off the generator, etc. Basically, they're not camping. Decisive is designed as both an anti-camp and an anti-tunnel. It activates for 60 seconds after you are unhooked. Which means, because you're only getting off the hook a maximum of 2 times per game, that you have 2 small windows to use it. Now, those 60 seconds, you are protected for a decent amount of time. 60 seconds is, you know, 3/4 of a generator by yourself, which is significant. The issue with Decisive is how easy it is to avoid. Now, Decisive is very easy to activate. You can just jump into a locker, or you can slow vault and force them to grab you, and it will activate immediately if you hit it. You have to run the risk of it glitching out, and you hitting it dead center in the middle, and it doesn't activate. So there's that. However, the key with Decisive is if the killer's not camping you or tunneling you, you don't get to use it. It's a waste of a perk slot. It's an option, but you have to go out of your way then and take the aggro after being tunneled. And not every killer wants to tunnel. And a lot of killers are very skittish about Decisive, going, okay, well, you know, I'm not going to do that. There's also ways a killer can wait this out. They can simply not pick you up for 60 seconds and slug you. They run the risk of you getting back up again, but they just down you again, and now you don't have Decisive. They can avoid camping and tunneling you. And Borrowed is the superior anti-tunnel perk. If it takes you longer than 15 seconds to get away from after you've been unhooked, right? If you go down within 15 seconds, that's what Borrowed is there for. If you run into the killer 30 seconds after you've been unhooked, well, I mean, that's just a bad play on your part. Not necessarily, you know, oh my god, I need Decisive here. And a lot of high-level killers will slug you to avoid Decisive. Or they'll see you're working on a generator, and they'll still not grab you. They'll say, okay, I'll just wait, because you have Decisive. Decisive is a very strong perk. It is a B-tier perk. It is not the #1 perk in the game that everyone makes it out to be. And I'm tired of hearing that argument, which is why I'm including it here. This perk is overrated. It is good. It is strong. But it's overrated. So, now we're going to talk about the perks that I feel are underrated. I want to start with one I don't see a lot. Poised. Poised is a very interesting stealth perk. Every time a generator is completed, you do not leave scratch marks for 10 seconds. Now, this perk does have some cons to it. For one thing, this perk doesn't really work if you're on a generator, if you're on a hook, in a locker, What if you're not moving, this perk has little value. Where this perk gains value is in that you leave no scratch marks for 10 seconds after any generator is completed. If you are the evasion person on your team, or if you're just taking the aggro in a solo queue, this perk is godlike sometimes. Especially against killers who rely on scratch marks, like a spirit. This perk works very well. This forces the killer to track off of blood and noise, and if you're running Calm Spirit, Iron Will, or something that negates blood, or if they can't track blood, then you've taken away another means for them to track you. It doesn't work in line of sight, but it's very good in indoor maps, and this pairs well with Quick and Quiet. It is, in my opinion, one of the premium stealth perks out there, because it can activate, yes, it can only activate 5 times a game, but it activates at an interesting time. If you're in chase when a generator pops, you can break chase off one use of poise, and that can be game-changing. It is not necessarily a perk you're going to, like, take out, like, say, dead hard for poise, but it's a perk that does its job. It's not a glitchy perk, like Distortion can sometimes be glitchy, where it doesn't consume a token, or it consumes 2 tokens. This is a perk that doesn't have that requirement. Just a gen pops, and you don't leave scratch marks for the next 10 seconds. And if you are immobilized when it activates, but then you get back up, whether you, say, with Unbreakable, or if you just get pulled off the hook at the second half of Poise, well, then you'll still have the remaining time to use that, which is a poor man's version of Off the Record, or Babysitter. So, it does do its job, and it does a very solid job. I think it needs a little bit more love than it currently gets. An interesting perk I want to throw in there is an anti-tunnel perk. This is another perk I don't see yet a lot of love, and that is Breakdown. Breakdown is kind of an interesting perk. It fits in the Sabo meta right now. Anytime you are removed from a hook, whether you unhook yourself, or you are unhooked by another survivor, the hook will break and the killer's aura is shown to you for up to 6 seconds, and the hook that is broken takes 3 minutes to respawn. There's a reason why I like this perk. This is a baby version of Decisive Strike, and it has much team-oriented benefit than Decisive. Decisive is a perk that you personally get the benefit out of because you stab them on the shoulder, they go, ow, you run away, and then they either tunnel you because you hit your Decisive, or they chase somebody else because you're already gone. With Breakdown, you're removing that hook for 3 minutes. That means that part of the map is unusable if a killer hooks someone. They have to go somewhere else. So for that short amount of time, that part of the map becomes very dangerous to a killer if they manage to down somebody and pick them up. They have to potentially risk a flashlight, a pallet save, body blocking, breakout, another form of Sabo on other hooks in order to safely get that survivor to another hook. In addition to this, this gives you some ability to track the killer by showing you the aura for 6 seconds. Generally, it's a good idea because it gives you an idea of where you need to run after you've been unhooked. So for example, if you are unhooked and the killer is coming from your left, you know, okay, time to tuck tail and go right to put as much distance as possible. Again, not a game-changing perk by any means, but I think it deserves a little bit more love than it's currently getting. Especially because Sabo is coming back into the meta a little bit more. And Sabo is very strong. Breakdown pairs wonderfully. The next perk that we are going to talk about is another green perk, In Any Means Necessary. Now this perk has talked about getting a rework. I personally don't think it needs a rework. I think all you need to do is just drop the time it takes to use it from 4 seconds back down to 3 seconds like it was on the original version of the PTB. Well, what does Any Means Necessary do? Any Means Necessary allows you to walk up to a pallet that has been dropped but not broken and reset it to normal. Now, there's a very large argument that I've gotten into before with people about the fact that Any Means Necessary does not work because a killer's just gonna break all the safe pallets anyways, and it's worthless at an unsafe pallet. That's bullshit. First off, certain maps in the game don't have safe pallets anymore. Period. Okay? The Saloon has very few safe pallets right now. There are still some. Hawkins has next to nothing. Lurie's has next to nothing. Jigsaw, next to nothing. And yes, there are a lot of maps that have really strong pallets, but the devs have said they're going around and removing that. Now, so the whole argument that this pallet really only works at either infinite pallets or killer shack pallets, and the killer's gonna break it anyways, doesn't really make sense. Not to mention the fact, this is what I would call a good support perk. You, being chased, are not going to use this perk. You, outside of a chase, running behind another survivor and resetting pallets behind them so they can reuse a loop, is much stronger than you running it and trying to use it in the middle of a loop, which a lot of people make the mistake of doing. This perk becomes strong because it has a cooldown. Think about it. It's a 2-minute cooldown. That means every 2 minutes, you can find a pallet and reset it. And there's the only bad time to use it is if you're in chase. If you're not in chase and you see a pallet that's been downed, pick it up. There's no reason not to. A good survivor can turn any unsafe pallet into a safe one. And this perk lets you mind game a killer. If a killer is not breaking the pallets and you're running around picking them up, they're going to keep getting stunned. Or they're going to keep getting looped. And it's going to waste more of their time against experienced survivors, which time is not something on the killer's side. This perk also is really annoying for a killer, because if a killer is like, oh, the pallets drop and they're a mind gamer, you know, if it's somebody like a huntress or something, and they're like, I can mind game this real easy. Well, if they're not picking up, if they're not breaking pallets because, it's a huntress, I don't have to worry about this shit, and you have a full team of people with any means necessary and list, and they're able to just fast vault and run, so they start breaking some pallets, so you pick them back up so they can't break them, it's a good strategy. Is it an overly complicated strategy? Yes, but then again, there's a lot of builds like that, like Medal of Mytho. The key with any means necessary is that it's not necessarily for you in chase, it's for you out of chase. And it's really strong if you know how to use it effectively. The last perk that I wanted to talk about out of the underrated perks that aren't controversial is Fixated. Now, before when I talked about Sprint Burst and Urban Evasion, I mentioned Fixated. There's a reason why. Fixated is a very strong perk, but not necessarily for the reasons you're thinking. So it gives you the benefit of walking faster. This is fine. It lets you move around without leaving scratch marks faster, which you could make the argument that, oh, well, you know, that's what Urban Evasion is for. But the difference is this is faster than Urban Evasion, so you might as well use this. There is the caveat of while uninjured, you walk faster, but they'll probably remove that. If you remember, old Urban Evasion had the same caveat. Why is this perk so good, in my opinion? Well, it lets you see your own scratch marks. You can see how the killer sees you looping them, which allows you to make changes on the fly as to your looping strategy. In addition to this, the 20% faster walking speed also makes it easier to go into Sprint Burst. You see, you have a longer time that you can walk forward before the killer catches you now. It's only a couple seconds, but still, before you have to start sprinting. A stealth killer that may be trying to ambush you by getting as close as possible before attacking, or say a Bubba, who's trying to rev his chainsaw up at the last minute, Fixated letting you walk a little bit further ahead before you start running can get you a bit of distance to make them force a miss. In addition, Fixated is a huge improvement over another perk I see a lot of people running that I think is very bad in Lightweight. See, with Lightweight, your scratch marks are visible for less. But remember, your scratch marks will fade away. And that can be just as confusing to a killer as there being no scratch marks. Fixated is better because it lets you see what the killer is seeing, giving you more insight as to what the killer is seeing. This makes it a much more effective perk than just simply trying to avoid leaving scratch marks in the first place. Once you leave the scratch marks, you'll be able to know how the killer is chasing you. The last perk that I want to talk about as well is the main subject of this. And if you've been sticking around waiting for the self-care, I applaud you. Thank you for listening to 30 minutes of rambling about 9 perks. For our 10th perk, I want to talk about self-care. A lot of people say self-care is shit. It's one of the worst perks in the game. It needs a rework. The history of this perk is that it was so strong at the start of the game, and there are people like me that this is my crutch perk. People have Decisive or Dead Hard or Adrenaline or Borrowed as their crutch perk. I have self-care. It's the perk I would, if you let me pick one perk to run, I would do it. Now, personally, I think that self-care should be base care. I don't think that this should be a perk. I think you should be able to heal yourself without a healing item or another survivor. I think that should be a thing. If the ability to heal yourself at 50% normal healing speed was based on every single survivor and they reworked self-care instead to something like, while you're healing yourself, your exhaustion timer will be reduced at twice the normal rate, or something like that that's relatively insignificant except into a meme build, this perk would then become less valuable, obviously, but it would make the overall survivor stronger. Self-care is strong for a multitude of reasons. I do not have to rely on other survivors healing me or running a medkit. Look at all of the other options you have besides a medkit. You have flashbangs, which you can use as a way to free survivors. You have flashlights, which can be used to free survivors, piss off a killer and distract them, and destroy hag traps. You have maps for tracking objects on the map that you might need to come back to later, like hatch or totems. You have skeleton keys and just other keys for opening hatch and seeing the killer's aura. You have toolboxes for sabotaging hooks and getting generators done faster. Why am I dedicating one whole spot to a medkit? Not to mention that that medkit can be taken away by simply running out of juice on it, or Franklin's. Which is a good perk. I'll be covering that later on. Self-care is also outmatched because you, the user, are the one that controls it. If the other survivors you are playing with are not hitting their generator skill checks, what makes you think they're going to hit their healing skill checks and bring the killer over to your location by fucking up and breaking all of the bones in your body? Therefore, self-care gives you the ability to counter bad teammates. Not just no teammates, but bad teammates. People make the argument that there are other options in the game, a great option being Bond. Bond is one that I see a lot mentioned, that, oh, you shouldn't be running self-care, you should be running Bond, it's more versatile. The difference is that Bond also has a 36-meter range. So if I'm running over to a survivor at 36 meters, and the killer's terror radius is 32 meters, and I hear the terror radius, and they have nurses, I'm not going to get healed. The killer's going to run over and kill me. Why would I run a perk like that? Well, you use Bond for other reasons, but it should not be intended for healing. And of course, there's the argument I already covered about, well, why not Inner Strength? Because Inner Strength has a limited number of uses. Now, self-care is slow. It takes you about 30 seconds to self-care without add-ons or without perks or killer perk slowdowns. The key with self-care, though, why it's so valuable, is because with good game sense, you know when to heal and when not to heal. Self-care also gives you the ability to 99 yourself and then pop the heal right before you get into a chase, and now you're full health, which you don't have to run the risk of another survivor healing you or running out of medkit charges at the last minute. It's always there. I will run self-care and not use it. The strength of this perk is that, yes, a lot of killer perks will counter it. Sloppy, chlorophobia, nurses. But this perk is solid because it's an option. In the same respect that a perk like, Deliverance is an option. It takes away altruism from the rest of the team, and it can help you out of a potentially dangerous situation where you have bad teammates that aren't prioritizing things properly. This perk, if you can activate it, can save you. So, Deliverance is another example of a bad perk that does good things. It's bad for your overall gameplay. It denies the rest of the team altruism, and it saddles you with a 60-second timer where you can't be healed. Well, self-care is similar to that. You're denying the rest of the team altruism, and you heal a lot slower, but you have that control in order to decide, okay, I need to heal now, these teammates won't heal me. In the same respect, there are a lot of times where people will sit there and teabag me to death, and they, oh, let me heal you, let me heal you, let me heal you. When we have a generator that's 75% and a killer with Pop Goes the Weasel who's just hooked a survivor. Let's bum rush the gen and get it done so he can't use Pop, chase us off it, and then camp the generator. So it regresses down to nothing, especially in a 3-gen situation. A lot of random survivors have killed me by blowing the gen just because I wouldn't let them heal me. Well, you shouldn't run self-care, you should let somebody else heal you. No. This is a situation of you as a survivor need to have the game sense to use self-care. This is the single hardest perk in the game to use. Period. Why? Because it comes down to game sense. If you don't have that game sense, and you don't know when to self-care, when to not heal, when to let somebody else heal you, this perk gets no value. Well, thank you for listening to the ramblings of the madman. I hope this has been very informational in terms of some perks you might give some more love to, or some perks that you might not give some love to. And again, this is also my opinion. I put this at the end because if you're going to make comments and stuff like that, I don't read my comments unless they come up in my email. So, yeah, have fun.